job of explaining the political significance of our trip and just generally the reason that we consider our solidarity with the DPRK to be such an important part of our party's program and our party's activities. I'm not going to try to cover a lot of the same ground. I just want to make some comments about various things that struck me about this trip. But first, let me just say that both before and after we went, I had the opportunity, sort of manufactured a little bit myself, to talk to some young workers, completely non-political people, about the fact that I was going to the DPRK or had gone to the DPRK. And I wanted to get their reaction, you know. And their jaws just dropped. You're going, where? You know, like, you can go there? And it just, you know, reinforced my knowledge that the tremendous amount of propaganda that people are subjected to that depicts the DPRK as this, just like the end of the earth, you know, I mean, just the most awful place in the world. And you can see from Comrade Larry's enthusiasm, and I'm glad he spoke first because this was his first trip there. He's fresh from seeing it for himself for the first time. It just shatters all those myths to be able to see it. But we know most people here will never see it, you know, unless the U.S. Army sends them, and that's not going to happen. But it did happen. 6.5 million U.S. soldiers went to Korea during the Korean War. 6.5 million went to Korea to try and subjugate that country. And I think that one of the first things that, as we try to figure out how we can best outreach, what can we do here to reach people who have been subjected to such a level of propaganda, is we've got to let them understand one way or the other that the U.S. for the last more than 60 years, 65, almost 70 years, has done everything they thought they could do to try and destroy the DPRK. That's the truth. That is actually what happened. They launched an invasion of that country, sent all these troops, dropped more bombs than they did in the Pacific Theater during World War II on the Korean people, flattened Pyongyang and all the other cities in the north, and the Koreans beat them. That's the way the Koreans feel. They're not happy that it's just an armistice agreement, but they're happy about the fact that for the first time in history, U.S. imperialism hit a wall, and they couldn't go any further, and they had to stop, and they had to pull back. And that had never happened before. So anyway, I think that, you know, is something that we just have to keep talking about and educating people on. And it's not an impossible task. And the reason it's not an impossible task is because things are changing in this country. That's why. Because for 50 years, 60 years, it's been very, very difficult to say anything about the DPRK that people will really believe because they've heard so much against it. But now there's a lot of things that they don't believe anymore that are being told to them about conditions in this country, about why they should go here and fight a war, there and fight a war, somewhere else and fight a war. While everything is falling apart in the United States, people are beginning to see, you know, hey, I don't believe this stuff anymore. I don't believe this is such a great system. I don't believe I'm going to, you know, live in the middle class as soon as I finish with my college education, which I don't think I'm going to get anyway. So we have a more receptive audience to speak to if we present our ideas in a way that people can understand and link our view on Korea to the situation in the United States, the needs of the working class, the struggle against racism, against all forms of oppression. Having said that about the media, I do want to say this. Before this meeting, I was going online because unfortunately I don't have any pictures from our trip to show you. We could show you some magazines from Korea which have really great pictures in them, but you know what? It would be more convincing to your friends if if you had other source to tell them about than the Korean magazines, right? So write this down. Go to photoblogs.nbcnews.com, and you will find that they had camera crew in the DPRK not long ago at all. Photoblog.nbcnews.com. And they took lots and lots and lots of great photos because they have, great professional photographers. And you don't have to read what they say about the picture because that's always slanted. Just look at the pictures and you will see everything that Larry was telling you about. A beautiful city, Pyongyang. Pictures from the countryside too, by the way, which also show, development. Healthy people, smiling, happy kids playing. And a lot of this is just candid stuff. I mean, it's not, posed or anything. They were just snapping pictures. So that's something that, we should let anybody we're talking to about the DPRK say, okay, you want to see what it really looks like? Here, look at NBC News' website and you'll see it. For some reason, they did that. They're not making a big deal out of it. I don't know if they ever showed it on NBC News, but it's on their website, on their blog, their photo blog. One of the things that was really important about this anniversary, I think, you've all probably seen how, as the DPRK was developing its defenses in the last year especially, by producing a long-range missile and having enough plutonium or whatever for a few bombs. Well, the U.S. of course has still thousands, but the U.S. went ballistic about the DPRK having atomic weapons, but they have a deterrent now. They have that deterrent, and it's a real deterrent, right? Yes, right. So what the papers had been saying was that, they didn't know that China was going to really be supporting the DPRK much longer because, they didn't want to be held responsible. The Chinese leadership didn't want to be held responsible for what DPRK was doing. Like the DPRK is this rogue state. That's the term they use. And that China was very upset about that. Well, one really great thing that happened was that for these celebrations that were being held on the anniversary of the end of the war, there was a huge delegation of Chinese veterans who had fought on the side of Korea in the war. And they were, wherever we went, when we went to these various events that Larry was talking about, at whether it was the circus or a concert or a huge thing in an enormous stadium called Mayday Stadium, by the way, that holds about 200,000 people. I don't know, is there any stadium that big that holds 200,000 people? I don't know. Anyway, there would always be big sections set aside for the veterans, the Chinese veterans and the Korean veterans. And they're all old men and women now, but there they were, and they were being accorded, just every ounce of love and respect from the people of this country that has been through so much and that so values their sacrifice and of course the sacrifice of all those who died in these terrible war. So not only were the veterans there from China, but the vice president of China was there as well and was on the reviewing stand. Now, I don't know, I mean, we were in Korea, we weren't in the United States when all this was going on, but I don't know if the U.S. media made much of this. I don't think they commented, oh, maybe it looks like China and the DPRK are more friendly than we've been predicting. No, they just kind of tried to sweep it under the rug. But, it was important. It was very important. One of the things, just for the comrades' sake to know, we've sent delegations before to the DPRK, and they have, out in the country, built into the side of a mountain, they have an incredible museum of gifts that have been given to their heads of state by visiting delegations for the last 40 years or something like that. Just an incredible museum, and it's enormous. It's all made out of marble, and just an amazing place. And many, many heads of state. I mean, they talk about the DPRK like nobody ever goes there from the rest of the world. Well, all kinds of heads of state have gone, large delegations have gone, and they have brought a gift. Especially, I think, in Asian culture, it's considered a very, very right thing to do. So we had gone ourselves to the DPRK on a number of occasions and taken gifts that were much more modest than what a delegation from India might bring, or some whole big, huge castle carved out of ivory, or a delegation from the Middle East would bring some ancient sword with all silver filigree, and ours were pictures of demonstrations and things like that, but very nicely done, and nicely framed and so forth and so on. And we get into this museum and we're looking at all this great stuff, and then the guide takes us into another room and says, and there were the gifts from Workers' World. Two of them very prominently displayed, very nicely framed in a case with all kinds of other stuff. So I thought you'd like to hear about that. And we took a gift with us this time, which again is in line with what we're capable of. We don't have some indigenous art that we can take, but we have our paper, which writes a great deal about the DPRK, and especially over the last year, because the U.S. has put so much pressure on them. We've got a lot of articles. So we did a booklet and a presentation, folder, and articles about the paper were in there, written by a whole bunch of different comrades. And we gave it to them, and they were very, very happy about that. And I'm sure that'll go up in the museum, so whoever goes on the next trip, you look for it. Let's see. Oh, yes. I just read, actually, since we came back, that the DPRK just announced that they are making cell phones now. They are manufacturing cell phones. One is it's called the Ari Rong. Now, Ari Rong is the name of a folk legend, kind of, that sort of typifies the Korean people's resolve to struggle. And we saw this huge presentation in this stadium. We wrote about it in Workers' World. I won't go into the whole thing about it, but it involved tens of thousands of people, all kinds of coordinated acrobatics, dancing, little kids jumping rope, not just one little kid with one rope, but then like three of them, and then two kids with a longer rope from the other direction, and then another bunch of kids with even longer ropes, and they were all coordinated, and nobody ever skipped a beat. Just amazing stuff, right? Showing unity, coordination, practice, concentration, focus, all of that. So anyway, they named this cell phone Ari Rong. The way it's written up in the media here is that, oh, well, yeah, they'll have a cell phone there, but, the people who have those cell phones, they won't be able to get on the internet. They'll only be able to get onto a Korean intranet, meaning, for Korea, just for the DPRK. Maybe they should ask themselves this question. Maybe the Koreans don't want the National Security Administration to be reading all their internet, all their conversations. It's just like that doesn't ever occur to any of these people writing these articles in the media here. And maybe that's the Korean people don't like the fact that you get on the internet and everything you say and write and so on is immediately, captured on digitally and stored away someplace in some mountain in Utah or something. Okay. I think we said that. Yeah, just my last point, really, is this. When you hear about the Korean War, that the consistent story that all the imperialist countries tell, and the media, of course, faithfully pass on to everybody, is that the Korean War happened because North Korea invaded the South. Now, North Korea, South Korea, it's one country. Are you invading when it's one country? When the U.S. sends 6.5 million troops to Korea, that's not an invasion. But when there's a civil war that's going on in Korea, like there was a civil war in the United States in the 1860s, that's an invasion? Because that's what it was. It was a civil war in Korea. And it had been going on for some time because the imperialists divided Korea when it was in the process of a revolution. It was a revolution against Japanese colonialism, which had oppressed the country for 45 years. It was 35 years, excuse me, from 1910, but really 36 years. And it even goes before the period when Japan formally annexed Korea, because for 10 years before that, Japanese imperialism was they went and they killed the queen, they went and they tried to kill all the leaders in the old government, the old really feudal government that you had in Korea. But Japan eventually took them over. So there was a revolution going on. And when Japan was a loser in World War II, it was an opportunity for the Korean people to rise up against the compradors, the people who had been the agents of foreign oppressors, who had been running the country against the will of the majority of the Korean people. And in the north, which was closer to the place where there had been a guerrilla war fought for more than a decade, because Japan was in northern China for quite a while before World War II. They took the province of Manchuria and declared it puppet. It was a puppet state of theirs. They called it Manchukuo. The Chinese Communist Party in Manchuria, 90% of its members were Koreans, because there was a huge Korean population that had moved into China, maybe over a long period of time, but also partly to, so that they could build up a resistance to the Japanese and have a rear base. So that's where the guerrilla army that liberated the northern part of Korea got their military experience. And they liberated moving in from China at the end of the war, liberated the north, and they wanted to liberate the south. And the people of the south wanted to be liberated. I mean, there were 100,000 people in the south who were killed by the U.S. puppet regime there before the Korean War ever started. This civil war was going on already. So for the U.S. to say, like everything was fine, and then all of a sudden the North invaded the South and we had to go over there and protect it, it's a lot of baloney. And it's just another example of the distorting of history in order to bring about some argument to justify an imperialist aggressive attack upon a country and an attempt to take it all over. They got U.S. troops into the southern part of Korea at the end of World War II, and they've been there ever since. Anyway, I think one final point is we need to keep our solidarity with the DPRK and with their struggle against imperialism on the front burner. And when you look around at the world right now, because there's a capitalist crisis raging everywhere, there's instability. I mean, we're going to have a report on what's going on in Egypt, which is maybe one of the most glaring examples of this. But there's instability everywhere. Everything is cracking apart, falling apart, and so many countries are convulsed in internal struggles because of world capitalism. It can't function in the old way anymore. It can't provide jobs. It can't. I mean, for millions of people, it can't even provide drinking water. It can't provide basic education, basic health care. And here's a country that 60 years ago was in ashes, and they have built up a modern education system, health system, all these things. We need to tell people here who are thinking about all these problems that seem to be insoluble around the world. Look, the Koreans found the way to solve the problems. They had extreme instability for years because they were invaded, because they were colonized, but they broke through and they built a society that's stable, strong, despite everything that's been thrown at them, and united. And how did they do it? They did it with communist leadership. That's how they did it. Communist leadership that put the interests of the masses of people first. We saw the, what do you call it? The emblem, their party, the Workers' Party of Korea has the hammer and the sickle, and they've added to it the brush. And the brush, it means the people who have jobs, sort of like intellectual kind of job, teachers, cultural jobs, all of that. And they have so many people who they have welded together on this basis that are for the Korean nation. They want to see the reunification of their country, and they will never, ever bow down to imperialism. They just won't do it.